Now the criticisms also extended to their being arrogant and proud and vain because of the way their wealth that they had and the power that they were able to wield. So, but there's no mention at all until Philip launches these attacks on them. There is no mention, no criticism regarding heresy, blasphemy, or sodomy, and that was all brand new in the case of Philip. For a while, in spite of those criticisms, the Templars were considered as necessary until the Holy Land. As long as there were still Christian places in the Holy Land, then they were needed. They had to defend the Holy Land. But once that when Acre fell there in 1291, then there was no longer a need for the Templars. Really, their purpose was over. They had actually purchased the island of Cyprus, and so they were installed in Cyprus. But there were Templar castles all throughout Europe. It was calculated there were 9,000 Templar castles of one type or another throughout Europe, and there were Templars in each one of those castles. The Pope blamed the fall of Acre on the rivalry between the Templars and another order there, who were called the Hospitallers. He said they were fighting with each other more than they were fighting the Muslims. Some people argue that the loss of the Holy Land meant that the Templars no longer had any reason for existence. They should be just disbanded. And Philip, what he tried to do was to control the Templars by offering to take over the order himself. That was his first attempt in the year 1287. He wanted to try and take them over, and of course the Templars didn't agree, and they had enough clout with the Pope at that time that that attempt did not get very far. So then he next tried to obtain their wealth by offering to fulfill. He said, okay, the Pope had suggested they merge with the Hospitallers. Philip said, okay, why don't they merge and I'll be the head of the order. So again, he was trying to look at a grab at their territory. And the Templars refused this, and the Pope did not give in. So they refused to merge, and the Pope didn't grant Philip's request. So then what he decided to do was to manipulate the papacy in order to get what he wanted. He had tangled with the previous Pope, Pope Boniface VIII. He had refused to give Philip the right to tax church lands in France. They had gone into a huge, there was no war because the Pope didn't have an army, but they were really at each other's throats for a period of time. And Philip responded, how? By accusing the Pope, Boniface VIII, of heresy, of buying church offices, of not being the true Pope, because he was elected by trickery, he said. That he had a private demon as an advisor. He had silver images of himself up in churches that were being worshipped. He was a sodomite also, so sodomy is thrown in there as well. And that finally, he didn't believe the French had souls. So these were the accusations that Philip threw against Boniface. Philip, he then followed up these accusations by kidnapping the Pope. He sent a small army there, and they kidnapped the Pope. Not for long. He was only kidnapped for about half a day before the Templars went and rescued him. And so the Templars rescued the populace in the town where he was. They rescued him, but it was too much. Boniface VIII was an old man. He was certainly a very aggressive Pope, but he was humiliated by this. He had a heart attack a few days later, and he died. The next Pope didn't last very long either. In fact, he was just on the point of excommunicating Philip and his minister who had led this attack, and the day before he was going to excommunicate them, he died. And so, of course, Philip said the judgment of God. That's why he died. So then the next Pope was a Frenchman, and Philip managed to engineer his election. So by encouraging the cardinals with different gifts and all, he managed to get his candidate elected. And this candidate was named Bernard of Got, G-O-T. He took the name Clement V. He couldn't go to Rome. Rome was ungovernable in those days, so there was factional fighting. There was basically a civil war going on, and so Philip offered him France. So he was able to stay in France. He stayed in a couple of different places in France. He finally moved to Avignon, which at that time, even though it was French-speaking, it was not in France. It was just outside the border. It was in the Empire, kind of what people call the Holy Roman Empire. But during the trial of the Templars and all, he was residing in French territory. So in 1307, Philip brought these charges against the Templars: heresy, blasphemy, and sodomy. The Pope Nicholas IV in 1290 had already granted the Dominicans in Paris, the prior there, the power to inquire into heresy in France. Okay, so he renewed the inquisitorial mandate. We saw this morning that the Inquisition was begun in 1230, or more or less 1234, I think. So this was 60 years afterwards. The Inquisition was still running, and the Dominicans had received from the Pope in 1290 the rights to investigate heresy there on behalf of the French monarchy, on behalf of the Pope and on behalf of the French monarchy. So Philip had a certain amount of clout with the Dominicans in Paris. So he assumed now this was all under his control. He ordered the arrest of all the Templars in France based on these fabricated charges. Clement objected, and Philip bullied him into giving permission for inquiries to be launched into the validity of the charges that he was throwing against them. So Clement said, okay, we'll just do an inquiry and we'll see what happens. Now, most of the Templars in France were not high-ranking Templars. A few of them were. In fact, the Superior General was there, Jacques de Molay, but most of them were low-level. Most of the knights were in Cyprus. That's where their headquarters were. They were out of reach of Philip. But they arrested, I think, 138 Templars were arrested by Philip. And they were tortured in horrific ways. 38 of them died during the torture. And only 4 of the 138 did not give some sort of admission to the confession to the charges. So only 4 were able to resist the pressures exerted on them. The others were confessing to charges, but if you read the confessions, they're so at variance one with the other that it's obvious that there's no consensus there, and they're basically trying to find out what the torturer wants them to say and say it so that they can stop the torture. So it didn't. They were not. And of course, they also, there was this famous Baphomet, which is a corruption of the word Mahomet, which is the word for Muslim in French. They said they had an idol there, and all the Templar houses were searched, but they never found any idol. So again, those charges were never substantiated in any way. There was never the slightest proof or evidence of that. So within 2 months, Philip had the confessions that he needed for the dissolution of the order. But of course, Clement stepped in at this time to wait a minute now. You were supposed to inquire into this. Instead, you've tortured these people, you've killed some of them. What's going on here? And so he stopped the whole process and said he was going to take it over himself. So he suspended everything, and he conducted his own papal inquiry. And of course, most of the Templars who had confessed, they recanted. They revoked their confessions. They said, well, we said that under torture. We're not really guilty. But Philip counterattacked, and he started a mass propaganda campaign against Clement and against the Templars. And so public opinion was way on the side of Philip in this, because the Templars were not well liked. Again, there was a lot of envy. People owed them money, and people believed. Philip was one of the first modern Machiavelli types. He was really able to manipulate public opinion very well. He's really a precursor of this, of the type that we've seen throughout history.